Good morning and welcome to the Long Beach Quarterly Economic Forum. My name is Mark Taylor. I'm proud to serve as the Director of Government Operations in California for the Boeing Company and to welcome you all today. I'll be your Master of Ceremonies for the event today. You are in for a very exciting program. You'll hear from a number of Long Beach business leaders who are helping their companies innovate to meet the challenges caused by the global pandemic. You'll also hear the latest economic statistics for our local, regional, and national economies. This event is coming to you live from the Long Beach Convention Center. We've set up different locations throughout the Terrace Theater and our city to show you how the Long Beach Convention Center is able to connect attendees and speakers worldwide. Again, this is a live event, so I want to encourage all of you with us to interact with the online tools provided by our host, Hubelo. You can send questions to our speakers, chat with other guests, and be sure to vote in the polls that will be coming up as part of our program. Before we get started today, I want to thank our sponsors who made this program possible. The Boeing Company is proud to be the presenting sponsor today. I also want to recognize and thank the other sponsors, the Long Beach Economic Partnership, Cal State University Long Beach, the Long Beach Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Long Beach Business Journal, Intertrend, the Downtown Long Beach Alliance, Long Beach Economic Development Department, and Shoreline Village. And now, to help get our program started, I'm pleased to introduce my good friend, John Keisler, Long Beach's Director of Economic Development. John and his team work hard to support businesses and develop our local workforce to create jobs and grow wealth in our community. John is passionate about the future of our city and has developed a broad range of innovative programs to help our local businesses grow and thrive. He was also a driving force behind the creation of the Long Beach Economic Partnership, the local economic development corporation that is putting on this event today. John, thanks for being here and for all you do to grow our local economy. Take it away.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you for everybody who is joining us from all over the region for this Long Beach Quarterly Economic Forum. Now, many of you may know this is an annual event. And for the last decade plus, we've been doing an economic update as part of an in-person annual breakfast. Well, today you're in for a treat because this is the first time that we are doing a Long Beach Live event in partnership with the Convention and Visitors Bureau and Steve Goodling's amazing team here at the Long Beach Convention Center. I am actually here today to introduce the Long Beach Economic Partnership. And the Long Beach Economic Partnership is a nonprofit development corporation that was called for by Mayor Garcia in his 2018 Long Beach Economic Partnership, which represents many of our most prominent companies here in Long Beach, some of them that were named by Mark Taylor just a few minutes ago, joined together to identify ways that we can attract investment, job growth, and small business support so that we can grow the economy and economic opportunities for all of Long Beach residents. So today, you're going to hear some of the best information available in the world about the Long Beach economy. Our preeminent scholars at Cal State Long Beach will be presenting data that only we have as the City of Long Beach from the State Employment Development Department. So thank you for joining us today, and go Beach.
Hey everyone, it's Mayor Robert Garcia, and of course, this year we're doing this virtually. I love this event. It's an opportunity for so many folks that are focused on the economic development work to gather and really share ideas and hear from some really great people. I want to just first thank Cal State Long Beach, the best university, for hosting this event every single year. Of course, our entire team with Economic Development Department, thank you, Mr. Keister, and just really the whole team. What's really critical this year is that we understand that COVID-19 will remain a serious threat to us, not just once we're all vaccinated, but from an economic perspective in the near and far future. We have now new unemployment numbers. We have businesses that are closing. We have workers that are out of work and that are looking for new opportunities to take care of their family. This is going to have an impact for us for years to come. And so the work that's happening here and every day is really important. Now, we know that the best way to get our economy back is first and foremost to beat this virus. We have to get to a place where we can reopen our schools, where families are full, where restaurants can be once again at full capacity, when retailers are able to welcome folks back into their stores, and where construction and development is humming again like it was before the pandemic. You know, there's a couple things that we should be proud of. Early on when the pandemic hit, most of the state, by the way, stopped all development. Here in Long Beach and actually in LA, Mayor Garcetti and I went to the governor and we made a pitch that we wanted to keep construction going and that we thought it could be done safely. And that work has continued. We've made sure that we provided relief directly to small businesses and to workers. We've made sure that folks that are unemployed can get back to their work when they're able to. And we're continuing to advocate through the state and through the federal government for more relief. We know that businesses cannot operate without more loans, more direct grants, and we're working with the next administration that's coming on board for a big and large relief package for Long Beach. I think folks know that I have strongly believe that this next administration is going to provide, in a big way, direct assistance for our businesses, for our economy, and for workers. The last thing I just want to say is that we've got to be thoughtful about how we bounce back. As we rebuild this economy, let's ensure that we're bringing everyone to the table, that we're taking care of those that need our help the most, that people experiencing homelessness have access to a place to sleep and a good home, that our hospitals are stronger than ever, that our health department is really prepared for pandemics of the future, that our public safety officers are trained to deal with emergencies just like this one. That's what we're doing every single day. We are going to bounce back better than ever. And in this moment, let's just take care of ourselves, be safe, and let's support this economic recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Garcia. We appreciate your leadership now more than ever. Now it's my pleasure to introduce another good friend, the Honorable Rex Richardson, council member for the 9th Council District in the city of Long Beach. Councilmember Richardson was first elected in 2014 and was re-elected to his role in 2018 to represent the heart of north of Long Beach, the 9th District. He's been elected vice mayor by his colleagues and is currently serving as the chair of the Economic Development Committee. Councilmember Richardson championed the creation of the Long Beach Office of Equity to help address the economic and health disparities affecting Long Beach neighborhoods and spearheaded a number of innovative initiatives that provide more opportunities to close the gap for vulnerable populations, including the My Brother's Keeper initiative. Thanks for being here today, Councilmember. We look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thanks, Mark. My name is Councilmember Rex Richardson. I'm chair of our Long Beach Economic Development Committee. Over the past 7 months, we know that we faced a crisis on 3 fronts. An economic crisis really putting a lot of pressure on our small businesses and our working families, a global pandemic that's changed all aspects of our lives. And we're also facing an equity mandate, really calling on all of us to reevaluate our systems, be more inclusive, and demand more fairness for the people of our city. Now, this has called on all of us to reevaluate the concept of resiliency. We need to invest in resiliency for families, resiliency for small businesses, build more public health capacity to get our communities through it. And I'm glad that our Long Beach communities really stood together and our Long Beach City Council has stepped up for you. We've delivered a comprehensive economic relief package this summer that really stands up for our tourism industry and our frontline workers. We've allocated millions of dollars of CARES Act funding to support our small businesses as well as social programs to really support and help our community. Just Tuesday night, we created a grant fund to help support our struggling restaurants in our community, and we plan to do a lot more. Regionally, I serve as president of Southern California Association of Governments, the nation's largest metropolitan planning organization and policy center, representing 19 million people, 191 cities across 6 counties. And we have a plan this year really centered on our Connect SoCal plan. This is our regional transportation plan, our compass for the future, our sustainable community strategy. It represents 300,000 jobs annually and $624 billion investment right here in Southern California. That is our compass for our recovery. Moving forward, there's a lot more that we can do here locally and across our region to advocate for the resources that we need to make a difference. I want to invite you on December 1st to the SCAG Regional Economic Summit entitled Charting Our Region's Recovery. You can visit scag.ca.gov/economic summit to register. And finally, on December 15th, I'm joining Long Beach City Council in asking for a comprehensive economic recovery package, economic recovery proposal that invests in things like our airport and our ports and our restaurants and our tourism industries to really set the stage for a robust economic recovery. We can do this together, and we can do this, we can build back together. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Richardson. We appreciate your comments and being here today. So now I get to introduce somebody who needs no introduction in Long Beach. My dear friend, Steve Goodling, has led the Long Beach Convention and Visitors Bureau for more than 20 years and kept it at the forefront of innovation that whole time. Under his leadership, meetings and conventions and successful meeting magazines have named the LB Convention Center best in the West the last 4 years and best in the region 3 of the last 4 years, beating out centers like Los Angeles, Anaheim, San Diego, and Anaheim. Steve has also been recognized as one of the 25 most influential people in the meetings industry and inducted into multiple Hall of Fames. I can speak on behalf of the entire city to tell folks how lucky we are to have him leading us through these times and all the challenges from COVID, which are leading the convention center to adopt digital technology and new tools to be able to keep the convention business going despite all these challenges. So now let me turn over to Steve to talk about all the exciting things that are happening here at the Long Beach Convention Center.
Mark, thank you very much, and appreciate that. And Councilmember Richardson, appreciate your comments as well. We certainly need to continue to follow our path of innovation and investment, and this facility is definitely one of those. I would like to share a background on tourism and what we have. As background, we're the 4th largest economic generator in Long Beach. Over the last several years, we had a 146% increase in TOT, going up to 32 million. In this slide, you'll see the economic impact is close to 70 million. 30 million of that is just the TOT, but the others are taxable sales. And that's important to see because on an overall basis, these are actually hard, cold cash that goes into the general fund, which keeps police, fire, sidewalks, and everything else in the city moving forward. Tourism is a major, major aspect of generating income for our city and jobs. When COVID hit, we actually had a occupancy of 15%. And that went the year before at 80%. Fortunately, over the last several months, we've been stabilizing at 41%. And that is basically people such as pleasure travelers and also first-line responders and others that have come into our city. However, it's not the corporate travel segment. We're not expecting that to return until at least next June, when most companies are opening up travel budgets after the vaccine's out. Back in June, it became really apparent that the convention center would not be open until next June. There was a story in the LA Times by a noted public health official, both known in Sacramento and in LA County, that said we'd be fortunate to have mass gatherings by this June, but more likely in September. And so with that, we've worked with Cal Travel and we worked with ASM Global, and we brought together a convention center coalition. That convention center coalition has, in 2 weeks, created an opening procedure that was adopted statewide by all convention centers, from San Diego up through San Francisco. We put it on the governor's desk, and the staff looked at it and said this was one of the most comprehensive, well-thought opening programs for any industry. Then sadly, just a few weeks later, the spike hit. And the conversation about opening quickly died and became one of containment. Moving forward, the team worked very closely during this time period and saved over 30% of the business. And that was really critical for us because these conventions could have just taken and walked away because there was a pandemic and it was an act of God, and they would have been able to leave their contracts. But fortunately, we had relationships with these clients, and over 35% of them stayed in our city. And those conventions moved into future years, 21, 22, 23. At this moment, we only have 15 available dates left. And also for the other 2 years, we're on pace with where we need to be. At this time, though, as we got past Labor Day and the uncertainty of the election and other things that were happening, the number of convention leads coming from out the industry have slowed. And so that was really, for us, a key moment to stop, because our clients were waiting to see and get vision for 2021. Were they going to have to cancel their conventions again next city? And in doing so, they wanted to keep their next available year open so they could use that in basically bartering or engaging the specific cities where they're encountered. However, we still got 15 convention leads this past month. Cities around us just got 0. And so we're still getting leads for future years. So we're pleased as we come out of this pandemic, we're on track with having this building again maximized and utilized. We also created an advertising program. And in that program, we ended up spending close to $1 million, and through digital and through print ads such as Westway's Los Angeles Magazine, and Los Angeles Magazine being a major generator for us, that was really key, because then we were able to bring them into our city because people were obviously doing staycations. In addition to that, we started to hear from our customers that they needed help with a new concept, and that's hybrid conventions. You have to understand, in the world of a meeting planner, they're used to bringing people together. And now they have to quickly learn how to be experts in virtual streaming. Very few ever had that experience. We thought the private sector might come and help with that issue, but quite honestly, this has been a steep learning curve for everybody. And so what we did is we brought people in, and for 12 weeks, from July through until September, we actually created a brand new department. In that department, we created a new position called Director of Creative Events in the Convention Center. That position is just as important with the Food and Beverage Department. In my view, going forward after this pandemic, no convention center will operate without both a production department and a food and beverage department. And so with that, the concept that was launched is actually activating our entire campus as an interactive, live streaming, virtual, on-demand, or live experience. We were also fortunate to bring Sandra Holden on board as a producer. And Sandra's background, she was born in Mexico City, came to Los Angeles, went to Annenberg School of Communications, worked for Univision, worked for KABC and other networks. And she, in collaboration with Trey, and in collaboration with our other professionals here at the Convention Center, who have worked at the California Governor's Women's Conference, the TED Conference for 5 years, and other production type of programs. All of these experts in sound, lighting, staging, producing, and now with our Director of Creative Initiatives, which is filled by a gentleman named Trey Jones. Trey is taking all the data from our customers and helping integrate them into our convention center. We'd like to share with you what we shared with the press and our customers 2 weeks ago, the introduction of Long Beach Live through a specialist, an innovation specialist that we hired, Amy Blackman. Enjoy the video.
Hi, my name is Amy Blackman, and I am an innovation strategist for the Long Beach CVB. And I'm here to unstealth their newest venture, announcing Long Beach Live. From Turnkey Spaces to Turnkey Broadcast, the future of events is here. Now, what do the future of events look like? Well, some in the industry call them hybrid events, but here in Long Beach, we call them blended events. It's the collision of IRL in real life and IRT in real time. It's the future of how we will experience events. The Long Beach CVB has teamed up with the Long Beach Convention Center to create a turnkey broadcast campus, delivering blended events in the new way we now experience them: live stream, interactive, and on demand, all at the same time. And Long Beach Live's broadcast platform is already outfitted with future-forward audience engagement technologies, things like live chat, social integration, remote interactivity, and letting the audience dictate the action. Blended events are an exciting new frontier because they will enable meeting organizers to reach larger audiences, create evergreen content, and practice new models of ongoing participant interaction and engagement. Long Beach Live has committed to the creation of a permanent new executive staff position. It's called the Director of Creative Initiatives. This person will be dedicated to ensuring that the planning process is seamless and fully customizable to the client's needs and objectives. Long Beach Live has also put their entire sales staff through PCMA's Digital Event Strategy certification course. So now all staff have the latest fluency in the technical and planning aspects of blended events. Long Beach is walking its future forward talk. From Turnkey Spaces to Turnkey Broadcast, the future of events is here. Welcome to Long Beach Live.
Needless to say, the response has been overwhelming on that video and our press release. Clients have asked us to assist them. Other convention centers have asked how we're doing it. ASM Global, which manages our convention center, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Moscone, McCormick Center, and others, out of the 320 buildings globally, we're the only convention center in the United States that has created an interwoven team to actually help create hybrid conventions. But like I said earlier, going forward, I know it's a model that'll have to be replicated because consumers are asking for it. And as I mentioned, 50% of our conventions in 21 and 22, the planners have already asked for help in creating this experience. A couple weeks ago, Student Television Network, as an aside, is a really neat association. They teach youth on how to learn to aspire and be hired within the industry. And so we were working with a gentleman who actually works at Warner Brothers. He's a post-production manager. And he actually was a student at one time and now lives here in Los Angeles. And he came to us along with the board. They cited us. And then they asked us to give a board Zoom presentation Sunday about 4 weeks ago. And as we heard that, and they asked our competition to do the same thing, another city located here in the Southland. As they did that, we decided as a team, Convention Center and the CVB, that we were going to demonstrate our Long Beach Live philosophy. And we did. And I'd like to share with you because they were blown away that we did more than just a Zoom conference call. It was actually interactive with different nuances and extremely produced. And I'd like to share that video with you. We were going after a one-year convention, and we'll share the results after this video.
Thank you for your time. My name is Mary Kay Liu. I'm the National Sales Director for the Long Beach Area Convention and Visitors Bureau, and I am coming from you live from San Francisco area, Northern California. I'm going to introduce now and send it over down to Long Beach, California, our CEO and President, Steve Goodling.
Thank you, Mary Kay. And on behalf of the City of Long Beach, welcome to Long Beach, California. And one of the things that we want to share with you is in 1 week, we're going to be announcing that our entire Convention Center campus is going to be a virtual television studio. And we're going to be taking the lead in that. We're the only convention center in the country that is actually doing that.
I don't know if you can see my background, but it's kind of dull, right? So let's change that. By the flick of my phone, we can change the colors, the globes, whatever you need. That's the innovative ballroom that we have here at your disposal.
Why Long Beach? Well, here's why. Because we're located directly on the Pacific Ocean.
I'd like to share also this last clip on how Long Beach has been featured in a series called CSI Miami.
What I'd like to do now, off script a little bit, live TV, is introduce our new Director of Creative Initiatives. Trey has joined our team. A little lower, Trey. There you go. There you go.
I got a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned that filming was going to be okay at the convention center and at the hotels.
I'm busting in on
In the
your
middle.
deal here. It got too hot outside. I'm now in a shirt. The answer is unequivocally yes. So what was a one-year convention turned into a 3-year convention contract. After that, the board that you saw, whose pictures were up there, had another discussion, and they felt that Long Beach was absolutely the right fit. If we hadn't done an interactive presentation, we would not have won 3 years. Best yet, they blocked 2 more years after that. And so we have a 5-year shot, and I believe that we will get there. Furthermore, because Burbank and Hollywood are so close, basically professionals in the industry will be coming to Long Beach to speak to students, bringing again those people in entertainment into Long Beach and showcasing all the wonderful things that are happening downtown. We couldn't be more pleased to be partnering with Student Television Network, let alone having their convention and their 3,000 students here every year. Lastly, in our wheelhouse, we were known for being innovators. In 2013, we had, there was a story in Venues Today that talked about our Pacific Ballroom and the creation of it. That Pacific Ballroom, as many of you know, is an arena that was underutilized, 40,000 square feet, 13,000 seats, which is too small for most concerts today. And so we converted it into a special event venue following the model of TED. And then from there, we opened up the Cove, which was another TED party. And that has trusses and lighting. And then lastly, we opened up the Terrace Theater Plaza. All of these special events actually have complete trusses and lighting system permanently rigged. And unbeknownst to us, what we were basically creating, in addition to a special event space, were television studios. So as we come out of COVID, as we're permitted to gather, we will be prepared as a convention center and as a city to go into the next foray, and that's interactive live events. And lastly, I really would be remiss if I didn't thank our former mayors and current mayors, Mayor Foster, Pat West, Suzanne Frick at the time, and Tom Modica, who were assistant city managers, and then going forward, Mayor Garcia and Tom and Linda and everyone else and the councils past and present. Without the leadership, without the foresight, we wouldn't be doing and having these special event venues. We wouldn't be leading, we wouldn't be in the forefront. They saw the vision, they agreed with us and invested in it. And because of it, we're now leaders in the industry. So thanks to our council, thanks to our mayors, thanks to our city management team, because collectively, and our team here, we've helped to put Long Beach on the map multiple times over the last 10 years. Thank you for logging in. That's the overview on tourism and where we're heading, and hopefully we'll be heading there soon.
Thanks, Steve. That's an amazing overview. I'm really excited. Hey, I've got a couple questions that have come in while you were talking. First one is, do you think hybrid events are here to stay, or do you think it's just a fad because of COVID?
Yeah, Mark, thank you. The answer is they're here to stay. COVID accelerated technology usage by at least a decade. People now expect to have the privilege of logging on either remotely or on demand, live, but people still want to come. And so what we've noticed with conventions that have gone entirely virtual, in many cases they've doubled their attendance. But as we're allowed to meet again, we know that we'll get a core group back, but I believe associations will even have a larger venue. For us as a marketing standpoint, those that didn't come to the Long Beach Convention will see Long Beach in its glory, and we'll have lots of video footage to share during a convention. But more importantly, will be relevant, and it is here to stay.
Well, thanks, Steve. I know your opinion matters, but why don't we see what our viewing audience thinks? Why don't we put up a poll and see what they think about this new idea? Can we bring the poll up? There's the poll. So this is for the folks watching at home. Would you participate in a virtual event, either live or on demand, if you weren't able to attend in person? We'd love to hear from you. And Steve, while they're doing that, I have one other question for you. And that's, when do you expect to see convention groups coming back to use the convention center here in Long Beach?
Yeah, the governor has said that mass gatherings would be the last phase that opens. Health officials have basically said that looks like June to September. So unfortunately, we look like we're holding tight at least through next June. We are hoping that small gatherings will be permitted, so at least our hotels can start to do weddings and other social events. But we know that corporate travel generally has been shut down until next June, and therefore our conventions, we're hoping they'll let us open at 100% with all of our pre-plans that were submitted to the governor prior to this spike. But those are things to be worked out, and I believe the vaccines will have a great impact on that decision as well. Thanks, Mark.
Well, thanks, Steve. We appreciate everything that you've done, and it appears that our audience at home agrees with you, because 100% have said that they'd be willing to participate in an event like this. So until we can get together in person again, we've got another great option here at Long Beach Live. So thanks, Steve, for being here.
Thank you,
Now
Mark.
it's my pleasure to introduce a colleague who's a Long Beach leader who's driving innovation in the aerospace industry. Philip June has a big job. Well, actually, he has two big jobs. He serves as the Director of Engineering for the Boeing Commercial Airplanes Engineering Design Center, and also leads the Boeing Global Services Commercial Modifications and Conversions Engineering Team, both located at Douglas Center here in Long Beach, right across the street from our airport. Philip leads teams of engineers to support the production and maintenance needs of our commercial fleet, and also who convert airplanes from passenger to cargo configurations. So as I said, a really big job and a really important job here. But the pandemic has created huge new challenges for our industry, and Philip's here today to talk a little bit about how he and his team are responding to those challenges here locally. Thanks for being here, Philip.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mark, and I appreciate that great introduction. Before I talk about the impact the pandemic's had on the Long Beach Design Center, I first want to give some context on the aviation industry as well as the impact it's had on the Boeing company. So like many industries that have been impacted by COVID-19, the aviation industry is no different. There's been an unprecedented impact, not only for us, but also for our customers. As you can see from the graph here, the levels of impact on aviation have been magnitudes greater than what they were from 9/11 as well as the Great Recession. Airlines will lose between $80 to $100 billion over the next year, and that's caused downward pressure on airplane rates, production rates for the Boeing company, for which we had a significant number of engineers supporting those efforts. So we've had to respond by really adjusting and going into a one Boeing strategy, which I'll touch on in a second here. But one thing I do want to mention is the Confident Travel initiative that the Boeing company is leading with global partners across academia, also with some of our competitors to ensure a safe, efficient, and healthy passenger experience during this time. And so we look across 3 layers of protections across 3 different horizons by using proven aerospace methods to ensure a health and safety experience. So as passenger traffic returns not only domestically but globally, we're in a great position to make sure that our passengers have a safe travel experience. So with that, what does all this mean to the design center that I have the privilege to lead in Long Beach? As I mentioned, we have a considerable number of engineers that support airplane production programs for commercial airplanes. And the downturn in production rate has required us to pivot to new forms of support for programs across our vast enterprise. That means increasing our work in Boeing Global Services, as well as for defense and space satellites. Long Beach Design Center is uniquely positioned not only in the region, but also in the company based on the expansive technical experience and knowledge that our teammates have. So we not only support aerospace products across the life cycle to develop, produce, and support these programs, but we've also moved into supporting programs like VC-25B or the Air Force One. We've also supporting satellites and space launch systems. And so it's been a real privilege to pair our capabilities at the Design Center with the needs and demands of talent across the broader Boeing company. And we've really seen a lot of great results from making those changes. And that positions us well, not only in the near term in response to airplane production rate reductions, it also positions us well over the long term as we continue to upskill our workforce and look for opportunities to add value. So with that, Mark, I'll kick it back to you, and I think we'll take a few questions.
Thanks, Philip. The first question is, what is Boeing doing to help prepare the future workforce to work in engineering and other STEM-related fields?
That's a great question, Mark. And as you know, we've partnered together on a number of different initiatives. And really, we view this as a business imperative for us over the long term. Again, Long Beach in Southern California has a long history of strong, diverse representation in the aerospace industry. And so we want to continue that legacy by not only investing in programs like the Long Beach College Promise and the National Society of Black Engineering Programs and chapter in Long Beach, but we're also leveraging the incredible talent and passion that our engineers have to reach back and develop the next generation of engineers. So just a few weeks ago, over 50 Long Beach engineers supported the 16th annual Mesa STEM Day activities by volunteering on a Saturday and talking to students from 6th to 12th grade about their experience and how they should stay focused on STEM activities and hopefully have a future career in that field.
That's great, Philip. Thank you. Well, Boeing made a lot of news yesterday when the 737 MAX was returned to service. Is there anything you can tell our viewers about that today?
Yeah, absolutely. So not only do we have engineers in Long Beach supporting the return to service of the 737 MAX, but we are also partnering with the Customer Support Center in Seal Beach to ensure a safe return of the 737 MAX. Going forward, there'll be some activity we'll support to ensure that we're able to safely deliver those airplanes to our customers over the next few years. And so I couldn't be prouder of the preparation the teams put in for what was an important event yesterday.
Great, Philip. I think we have time for one last question. So
Sure.
That is, what's the thing that has you most excited about the future for Boeing in Long Beach?
Well, great question, Mark. I think what's got me most excited is our ability to support more than just commercial airplanes in the region. As I mentioned, there's a deep history in Long Beach, deep aviation history that includes more than just commercial airplanes. We're going to do our part to extend that legacy by working on autonomous programs with our Huntington Beach site, satellites with El Segundo. And so as our next generation of engineers really start to get exposed to the vast work and products that the Boeing company provides, we're seeing a lot of great excitement from them. We're also giving our later career engineers an opportunity to learn something new and continue to be lifelong learners. We think that'll put us in a great position over the next few years to continue to grow in Long Beach.
Awesome. Thanks for being here today, Philip. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Now let's look at how Long Beach is helping lead the way forward in the biomedical field. Dr. Indipal Radhawa is pioneering new treatments for life-threatening food allergies right here in Long Beach. Dr. Randhawa and his team at the Translational Pulmonary and Immunology Research Center, or TPIRC for short, develop a comprehensive multi-system approach resulting in individualized treatment regimens for allergy patients. Over the last 10 years, he's successfully treated more than 2,000 patients at a near perfect success rate, offering food allergic patients the freedom to safely eat foods to which they were once deathly allergic. TPIRC is an unconventional clinic and research center where precision medicine and data analytics drive the treatment of not only food allergies, but also a series of rare orphan diseases. Let's watch a brief video and learn a little bit more.
When he was 10 months old, he stopped breathing when he had milk for the first time.
When her face swells up twice the size, it's quite scary.
And to eat a nut unknowingly and go into anaphylactic shock, EpiPen is not a guarantee. These children can still die.
I drove him to the hospital, which I shouldn't have done. I should have called an ambulance. And I remember calling to my daughter in the back seat, who was 2, and asking her if his lips were blue.
I had this one family who lived up in the hills here nearby, and her son was anaphylactic to milk. And she knew that, diagnosis for years. He got exposed. And unfortunately, as many folks who deal with this condition see, sometimes the symptoms don't appear right away, and they may not appear as aggressive. And so she thought her child looked okay. She was literally holding her EpiPen in her hand. She put him in the backseat and started driving him down the hill. By the time she got to the bottom of the hill, he already had so much swelling around his brain that he was brain dead. So I had to go talk to this mother afterwards outside and say, you know, your son is not with us anymore. But the entire time, the only thing that stuck in my mind was that she was still holding on to that EpiPen. Literally clinging onto it as if it was her lifeline. And then I said, okay, so that didn't even work. Maybe there's a better way to treat that, and that's what eventually led to the whole treatment process here at SoCal Food Allergy. We have a basic science laboratory with staff, laboratory technician, PhD researcher equipment. We also have a diagnostics laboratory. We have a bioinformatics unit. We actually have a full team of people building software on a regular basis, and a food technician lab.
We have collected over 1 trillion data points as part of a very large cohort research study.
We are utilizing those data points in heavy analytic cycling to predict how their individual immune systems will respond to treatment. These are kids who otherwise could not eat very tiny amounts of nuts, peanuts, milk, eggs, etc. Ingestion of those allergens would have caused a life-threatening event. These kids can now freely eat any amount of those foods safely, removing the risk of that condition.
I'm excited to let you know that Dr. Randhawa is here with us today, and we're ready to take a few questions. Hi, Dr. Randhawa, how are you?
Good morning, Mark. Glad to be here, and I'd like to thank the Economic Forum for inviting us to speak today.
Well, hey, that video was amazing. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your center and your treatment approach.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'd again start off with saying that I came to Long Beach, 15 years ago with a totally different model. Obviously, I'm a multiple board certified scientist physician who's trained at a lot of great places across the country, but my main goal was to try to deal with conditions that others would simply not want to deal with. These conditions are called orphan diseases. And as orphan clearly connotes, these are conditions that people largely abandon. And so the area of food anaphylaxis is a serious one, and it takes a very serious and complex approach. That is what we have brought to the city of Long Beach. The technology, the applied mathematics, the research science. We're in one of our research laboratories right now. And what this has allowed us to do is to create really detailed, high complexity molecular analytics that can predict how to induce tolerance in one patient at a time. That is now 10,000 patients right here in the city of Long Beach, which is really a wonderful thing from a technology standpoint. And I think one of the most important aspects is to note that the majority of our patients come from other states and even other countries. We've been able to actually maintain this success now for well over a decade, and we are now continuing to expand right here, making Long Beach our home.
Awesome, that's amazing. How has COVID affected your operations? Have you had to innovate to continue to serve your patients?
That's a great question, Mark. I'd say step one is understanding the infrastructure of what allows us to succeed, whether it's food anaphylaxis or other orphan conditions. That includes software, hardware, technology, and being able to understand a disease. So we actually have never shut down a single day during this entire time of COVID. In fact, we didn't have a choice. Our patients are on a course of immunotherapy. We can't simply turn that off. So we had to rapidly innovate, and we've done so successfully. This includes building beacon technology, tracing and tracking technology, and most importantly, being able to test on-site with rapid turnaround in 60 to 90 minutes of the highest quality tests of COVID. So what this allowed us to do was build a full software integrated system with a functional dashboard where at any given time amongst hundreds of employees and thousands of patients, we know where across 100,000 square feet of space, where everything is happening at what time. So what this has resulted in is about 8 months of time, 40,000 foot traffic in 100,000 square feet of space, and just 2 perimeter breaks in all that time, which we were able to lock down, basically nullify, and have no problems moving forward. So that's the type of success we've been able to succeed with.
That's really impressive, Doctor. As far as I know, you're one of the few biotech firms in Long Beach. What kind of economic impact do you think you're having locally?
You know, it's been very interesting to see our growth as a company, as a nonprofit over years of time. And one thing I didn't quite realize was our impact across many different sectors. We work very closely with Cal State Long Beach. We work very closely with Memorial and other hospital systems. So what we drive from a research, science, and clinical standpoint has been expanding and is significantly impactful. But one area that I didn't pay much attention to is tourism. We literally bring in thousands of patients and their families in here per month. In Long Beach, they're staying at hotels, eating at restaurants, and so forth. So we recently completed an economic impact report that totaled and tallied the number to close to $40 million. Our one organization is having that kind of impact right here in Long Beach.
Wow, that's amazing, Doctor. You actually anticipated one of the questions that our folks at home asked. There's another one here. What are your short and long-term visions for TPERC and Southern California Food and Allergy Institute here in Long Beach?
You know, I like to think big, dream big. The way I look at orphan disease, and I really look at any disease for that matter, is to understand that we have to change the way we approach medical research. It starts with that. If we've learned one thing from COVID, is that it is entirely too frustrating to have research adapt slowly to such a complex disease. So what that means is our goals in the near future are to expand, to actually build a campus. That campus needs to house all that structure, the technology, the research science, the actual manufacturing side of devices and therapeutics, all the way to actual clinical therapy. So we would love to see our campus start to grow. We have those plans in place here. We'd love to make Long Beach our home and our headquarters for this organization, and hope over time it can continue to grow regionally and eventually nationally.
That sounds amazing. I hope John Keisler is still paying attention. This just sounds like an amazing opportunity for the Long Beach community. So we have time, I think, for one last question here. Let me see. Can we scroll ahead? Oh, I guess the last question we have is how does your business support the tourism and hospitality industry? I think you told us a little bit about that, but why don't you talk a little bit more about where your customers are coming from and what they do while they're here?
Absolutely. Right as I was coming up to this presentation, I ran into a family from Long Island, New York, and they're here for their second phase of introduction into the program. This young lady, who's I'm assuming about 13 years of age, would be here for the next 15 to 16 months. She has about 9 to 10 additional visits left. That person's coming in with her family, and we've been able to create a COVID safe zone for these folks, where even if there's quarantine restrictions, we're able to test them on site, keep them safe. We have created so many parameters to allow the inclusion of so many individuals from all across the country. I've been absolutely amazed that we even have patients traveling internationally during this time. So I think a lot of this tells us that if we use technology in a proper way and we use it in a way that's innovative, we can really continue much of our business activity and continue to even grow during times like this.
So the last question I have for you is, I heard you say international patients, Long Island, they're streaming in from all over. There must be quite a demand for your services. All right, how hard is it to get in to see you?
We do have an enrollment list, or basically a wait list that's usually in the thousands of individuals. We have no choice but to grow. I encourage people to check out our website, socalfoodallergy.org, and we'll be in a position here as we continue to grow. I hope Long Beach will continue to support us, make our headquarters here, expand out further, and we'll be able to treat all the 6 million patients out there in the country and much more globally who need this help for life-saving therapy.
Thank you so much for being here, Doctor, and thank you so much for what you're doing to improve the lives of patients around our region and country. Really exciting. I had no idea that was happening right here in Long Beach. Very exciting. We're going to move ahead. You know, as you can see, Long Beach has taken a leadership in the convention business, the aerospace industry, biomedical, and also an industry more near and dear to my heart, food. So I'm pleasure to introduce Chef Wynn and her husband Jeff Kirschenbaum, the proprietors for Kirsch Baking Company. Kirsch Baking is Chef Wynn has been a professional pastry chef for over 15 years. She's worked in a variety of bakeries and restaurants from Paris to Vegas to Los Angeles, and was the executive pastry chef at a 2-star Michelin restaurant, which is pretty darn impressive. Jeff, her husband, spent a decade on Wall Street before deciding to pursue his passion in the hospitality industry. Together, they've built a thriving business here in Long Beach that the pandemic can't stop. So let's watch another video to learn a little bit more about what they're doing.
Hi, I'm Wynn Kirschenbaum. I'm the pastry chef of Kirsch Baking Company.
And I'm Jeff Kirschenbaum. I handle the operations side of Kirsch Baking Company, and this is our story.
The whole idea started, honestly, with one cookie, which is now called the Jeff's Signature Cookie. And it's called the Jeff's Cookie after my husband, because when we started dating 5 years ago, I'm a pastry chef, so I would bring him pastries and sweets and like everything you can imagine every time I'd see him, you know, and he'd be really excited, he'd eat everything. And a couple months into it, somehow I find out that he's dairy intolerant. And I want to throw up because I'm like, this man I've been poisoning for 2 months, right? And he's allowing me to. So first of all, that's true love. But second of all, I had to find a solution. So I developed something called Jeff's Cookie. It's gluten and dairy free. You wouldn't know it. It's like dark chocolate, chewy. It's made of only just a few ingredients.
And then I'd bring them to work and people would go crazy. I mean, as crazy as I would go over them.
And then COVID happened. Fast forward 5 years later, we were working for the same restaurant group and we were furloughed in March, much like millions of Americans. So for a few weeks, we were all home together and it was really, really beautiful. We thought, well, I mean, we're enjoying this time, but we do have obligations, you know, for our family financially and things like that. So like we had no choice, you know, like we have to go for it because there's nothing else to do. You know, we could sit there and wait, but that would just not feel like us. So we thought, we'll do something.
Towards the end of April, we decided to put a website together with the goal of trying to get up in time for Mother's Day. Mother's Day, we had such a great response. And then June comes and Father's Day, we have an even bigger response.
Initially, I was making them here. But then when the orders started coming in, we realized quickly that we can't do it. We gotta shut it down, So, once it went beyond family, we got into a commercial rental space. And then now we're gearing up for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and we're already getting corporate orders and we're getting things kind of lined up. So we're just praying that it goes well and that, every cookie comes out beautiful and everyone's happy. For me, my dream to have a bakery was not really to have a bakery through the mail, but I adjusted, you kind of, evolve with your circumstances, and I think ultimately it'll get me to the same destination. Really, it worked out for us in that people wanted to send love, and it's so nice to open your door and find a box of cookies waiting for you, so that really sparked something beautiful for us, that we were able to bring a little bit of joy during such an uncertain time.
I'm delighted to let you know that Chef Wynn and Jeff are here with us today. Hey, Chef.
Hi, hello, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for being here, and thanks for sharing your amazing story. I have a couple questions for you. First, have you faced any shipping challenges as a result of launching an e-commerce website during COVID?
Yeah, Mark, thanks for asking. We experienced a lot of challenges early on, and a lot of the shipping carriers were experiencing delays due to COVID and understaffing. And we just had to go through each carrier, see who was the most consistent, the best quality, and the fastest for our perishable product. And we landed on a really great carrier, and we just stay in constant communication with them and our customers to make sure that our cookies are being delivered as fast as possible.
Great. What are your plans for Kirsch Baking in 2021?
Ooh, well, our hopes and our dreams are that we'll find, a brick and mortar for our bakery, our business, somewhere in Long Beach, plant our roots in Long Beach, build a business, raise our family here. And in the very near future, we're testing that idea out by doing our very first pop-up. So it's great for us because we've never actually met our customers. So for the first time, we're going to pop up the day before Thanksgiving at Little Coyote on Retro Row, and we're selling pies online. All our customers have purchased them online, and they're going to pick up, and we get to meet them for the first time. So we get to, meet them and kind of feel the business out and see if a brick and mortar really is for us.
That's exciting. Is there still time to get orders in?
Yes, you have until Sunday evening.
The last question I have is, what other factors that you Chef Wynn, what do you consider when you're creating items for your menu?
It gets a little tricky because everything is shipped. So everything is shipped 2-day express. So, firstly, on a culinary level, it's seasons, right? So I base my menu selection on seasonality and what's in season. But secondly, I have to really consider what kind of recipes, what kind of cookies will make that trip, that 2-day express trip. And when our customers get it, it still has that same integrity. It's still excellent, it's still delicious. So I'm limited to a few, certain kinds of recipes, certain kinds of cookies, just to make sure that they get something great.
Awesome. Well, I tell you what, I think our online guests want to help you select the next cookie for your business. We have over 200 people online now, and there's a live poll. Do you want to tell us about the poll, Chef Wynn?
Yeah, Jeff will tell you about it.
Sure. So we're really excited. We want your feedback to determine what our next cookie will be. The choices are oatmeal raisin, speculoos, which is a crunchy brown sugar cookie with warm spices like nutmeg and cardamom. Then we have a chocolate Elvis, and for people who don't know, that's dark chocolate, bananas, and peanut butter. That will be a dairy-free and gluten-free cookie, so one of my collection. And then we have a brown butter shortbread.
Well, they all sound amazing, but I can tell you right now, Elvis is out to a big lead. Thank you for being here. Best of luck with Kirsch Baking, and make sure you let me know where it is. I'm rooting for downtown Long Beach, so it's walking distance from home for me. So now, the time you've all been waiting for, the economics portion of our program. Long Beach is so lucky to be home to one of the top public universities in the country, and we're very lucky to have two of its preeminent economists with us today. Dr. Robert Kleinhentz is an adjunct professor of economics and the associate director for the Office of Economic Research at Cal State Long Beach. He brings more than 30 years of experience to his public speaking, studies, and policy analysis. A leading voice on the economy at the national, state, and local level, he is a frequent contributor to the media, appearing on CNBC, Bloomberg, NPR, and in numerous publications across the country. Dr. Seiji Steinmetz is professor and chair of economics at Cal State Long Beach and director of the university's Office of Economic Research. Dr. Steinmetz's research specialties include transportation, urban planning, and environmental economics. But he's especially proud of his role in developing the annual Long Beach Latino Economic Report and the Long Beach Quarterly Economic Forum. I'm pleased to hand over the program to Dr. Kleinhentz to get us started.
Thank you, Mark. It's my privilege to speak to you today on behalf of Cal State Long Beach, the Office of Economic Research, and bring you the U.S. and California outlook. We'll begin in just a minute once the slides come up, but as we're waiting, I just want to point out that the first half of this year has undoubtedly been difficult for all of us in so many different ways. But I'm here to tell you that as of the second part of this year, we've turned the corner in terms of the economic performance, and we're recovering, maybe not as fast as we would like to, but the economy is engaged in a slow, cautious recovery. We'll look at that both at the national and at the state level. We'll also take a look at housing in California to wrap things up. So first of all, with respect to the U.S. economy, we really want to see how it's doing by looking at its vital signs. Those vital signs are the labor market, GDP or economic activity, and inflation. So we'll look at each of those in turn. What you're seeing here are the unemployment rates for the state of California and for the United States. As we started 2020, we were in the middle of the longest expansion on record. And so in February of 2020, just before the pandemic, the unemployment rates were below 4%, both in the state of California and nationally. But you can see on the screen that in just a couple of months, the unemployment rates quadrupled to 16% for California, to over 14% for the United States. That was the pandemic shutdown that we all experienced in the months of March and April and May. And so then we saw the unemployment rates peak as we approached the middle of the year. And many of the industries that were the hardest hit were those face-to-face industries, such as leisure and hospitality, healthcare for a period of time, personal services, as you know. So each of those industries were facing great challenges. Other parts of the economy were also facing difficult challenges as well. California was harder hit than the United States, in part because of the mix of industries that we have. We had a little bit heavier emphasis on some of these face-to-face industries, and we also have been slower to reopen. Both of these are contributing factors to the slower pace of recovery. So you can see that the unemployment rate for California at this time is at 11%, whereas for the nation, it's at 6.9%. We're just trying to advance the slides here. The next indicator we look at is the basic heartbeat of the economy, GDP. Those are the bars that you're looking at over on the left-hand side. As I said, we were in peak record expansion territory leading up to the pandemic. So in the fourth quarter of last year, GDP was over $19 trillion. In the space of just 2 quarters, GDP fell by $2 trillion, about 10%, to $17 trillion. That was an unprecedented decline in GDP over such a short span of time. Now, in the months since then, really in the third quarter of this year, we regained a fair amount of that $2 trillion loss. We advanced GDP by $1.3 trillion, but we still have a long ways to go in terms of economic recovery. You can also see 2 other lines here. The green line represents consumer spending. And the reason I'm talking about that is because it's 2/3 of the overall economy. So as the consumer sector goes, so goes the rest of the economy. And you can see the sharp pullback that occurred earlier in the year. During the midst of the pandemic shutdown, we have since seen the consumer spending has returned and certainly is going to be on the path of recovery as we go through the rest of the year. And part of that has been spurred by the support that we saw at the beginning of the year, the pandemic, the $3 trillion support package that the Congress passed, along with a lot of liquidity that the Federal Reserve Bank made available. So we're just going to advance to take a look at this downturn that we saw really lasted 2 quarters. All in all, probably will turn into about a 3% decline in GDP for this year. It's worth looking at how the pandemic disruption compares with other events. So it doesn't come close to the Great Depression, nor does it come close to what happened right after World War II as the economy was retooling from a wartime economy to a consumption economy. It's going to turn out to be somewhat more severe when all is said and done than the Great Recession, which of course for many of us is still a recent memory. But the fact is that the downturn occurred in a much shorter span of time than the 6 quarters that we saw during the Great Recession. So as of the 3rd quarter of this year, we're seeing that the economy has advanced. And so that's a good sign. We expect to see that continue over the foreseeable future. We advance the next slide. There we go. So the consumer sector, as I said before, is 2/3 of the economy. So we want to know how it's doing. It's going to improve as jobs and wages improve over the coming months and over the coming quarters. We saw a wealth fall in the first part of this year, but it's already come back as the stock market has improved. Homeowner equity has been on the rise. Consumers have been cautious about their use of consumer credit, like loans, auto loans, and things like that, which is certainly understandable under present circumstances. And the consumer sector, as well as the business sector, has benefited from the federal backstops that we saw earlier this year. The $3.3 trillion package that the Congress passed, as well as various liquidity efforts that the Federal Reserve Bank has put in place. So we're seeing the economy recover. We're seeing the consumer sector recover. It's going to take longer than I think a lot of people want it to take, but we are moving in the right direction at this time. On the right-hand side, you can see consumer spending compared with the beginning of this year prior to the pandemic shutdown. And we certainly saw a huge slide in consumer spending during the shutdown. Now, as we approach the end of the year and the holiday season, we're about 4% behind where we were when we began the year. So we're moving in the right direction at the present time, and there's at least some thought that the holiday season might even be on a par with last year's holiday season in terms of retail sales. Maybe a little ahead, maybe a little behind, but certainly not as bad as we would have expected earlier this year. So the consumer sector is one part of the economy. The business sector and government and international trade are the other 3 sectors of the economy. Let's take a look at those in turn. Business spending fell just as consumer spending fell during the first half of the year, but it's also been on the rebound in the 3rd quarter of this year, so that's a good sign. That makes up about 15% of the U.S. economy, so we need that improvement in order to see the overall economy move along the path to recovery. And international trade, both imports and exports, were very hard hit during the pandemic, both from a decline in demand perspective and also from a supply chain perspective. Both have improved in the last quarter. And locally, we're seeing that the ports of Long Beach, which we'll hear a little bit more about later on, the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles have had significant improvement in the container activity that they have counted on for so long. So those 2 sectors of the economy are on the mend at the present time. That's good. I think zooming out for a minute, we got to recognize that none of us have been sitting in our hands watching this economy go by. We've adjusted as the need has arisen. And in making choices and substituting one activity for another in order to keep moving forward in our lives and in our business activities. All of that has helped to support business activity and the advance of the overall economy. So whereas we had in-person meetings in the past, at the present time we're having virtual meetings such as these. Many people have not just learned about how to use Zoom, but they've used them for a variety of business as well as personal activities. And instead of dining in, we find ourselves doing more carry-out or contact-free deliveries. Each of these alternatives that we have selected over the last few years, several months, really have enabled the economy to move forward. What you're looking at here is the fourth sector of the economy, government spending in the form of the federal government spending. And the federal budget deficit has been in the $1 trillion range beginning last year. We expect it to stay in that $1 trillion range for the foreseeable future. That's not because of the pandemic. The 2020 and 2021 spike in deficit spending is the result of the increase in spending associated with the pandemic. But really because of the tax cuts and the spending plans that were put in place back in 2017 by the Congress, we're looking at $1 trillion deficits for over the foreseeable future. Now, the other vital sign of the economy is inflation. So we've looked at the labor market, we've looked at GDP and its parts. Now we're looking at inflation, and in a nutshell, inflation is low. There's a lot of surplus, a lot of slack in the economy at this time. We don't really expect to see inflation flare up anytime soon. That's a good thing, because with low inflation, we're able to keep interest rates low. So let's take a look at the financial markets next. You'll see that the 30-year mortgage is at a record low. It's under 3%. The benchmark 10-year Treasury is under 1%, where it has been for quite some time. I never thought I would have seen it like that. And then, of course, the federal funds rate, which is the key benchmark rate that the Federal Reserve Bank uses to move the financial markets, is essentially at zero. So money is cheap. And so it's no surprise that we've seen industries and sectors such as housing take advantage of low interest rates, and we've seen heightened activity as a result. The stock market, of course, goes through its gyrations no matter what happens to the economy. So it's important to recognize, on the one hand, that the stock market is not the economy. So you can see the slide that occurred during the period of time leading up to the pandemic shutdown. And in the months since, we've seen the stock market advance nicely. But it's a forward-looking indicator of the economy. It's also influenced by a number of other things. So don't take your cues about the performance of the economy in the here and now from what's happening with the economy, because it's just moving in lots of different directions for lots of different reasons. Now let's take a look at the California economy. So direct your attention to the top row in this table, and you can see that back in February we had 17.6 million jobs in the California economy. During the shutdown from February through April, we lost 2.6 million jobs, about a 15% decline. We've recovered about 1 million of those jobs so far, which amounts to the 38% of jobs lost you see there at the top. Looking at the table, you can see that the hardest hit sectors were those face-to-face sectors, such as leisure and hospitality, healthcare, retail, trade, and so on. Each of these sectors are on the road to recovery, but you can see by looking at that next to last column that very few of the industries have already recovered the jobs that were lost. And so we still are moving at a very deliberate pace here in the state economy, whereas California has recovered 38% of the jobs lost so far. The nation as a whole has already recovered about half, a little more than half. Part of the reason for the slow pace of recovery has to do with our more deliberate reopening effort, and also with the mix of jobs that we have here in California compared to the nation as a whole. A little bit of good news. You see, we're looking at unemployment insurance claims right now, and they have edged down in recent weeks. They certainly are far lower than they were during the early weeks and months of the pandemic shutdown. So we are indeed moving in the right direction as far as this economic indicator is concerned, and so many other economic indicators. We're just not moving as fast as people would like to see us move and recover. So next, let's take a look at California's housing situation. You probably heard a lot about how the housing market has just taken off as a result of low interest rates. Well, that's part of the story, but there's a lot of other details that we need to be aware of. So indeed, California's home price is in record-setting territory. It's over $700,000 as a result of low interest rates and tight supply. But you can also see that home sales have come back. They've really come back compared to the slide at the beginning of the year. As of September, home sales are still about 7% below last year's level. We'll probably close that gap as we finish out 2020 and move into 2021. But the fact of the matter is that record prices and this recovery in home sales has really been driven by, wait for it, very low interest rates. So mortgage rates, sorry, let me go forward here for a second. Low interest rates, of course, have made it possible for home buyers to really stretch their dollar when they're both putting that down payment down and when they're buying the home. So we've got low mortgage rates that have enabled home prices to increase. The other thing that's been driving home prices up is a very tight supply in the market. And so unsold inventory is our gauge of the supply in the market. The average is about 4 months statewide. You can see that the unsold inventory index for LA County is just at 2.3 months. It's well below where it was a year ago and certainly well below any long-run average. And you can see elsewhere in the region that the supply of homes is very tight. So you couple low mortgage rates that drive demand with very tight supply, and the result is going to be increases in home prices. So while that sounds good for prospective home buyers, there are other signals that are telling us that the housing market still has a ways to go, certainly has a long ways to go. Homeowners who currently own homes and may have financial difficulties, in many instances have been fortunate to get a forbearance plan so that they can make it through these very difficult months, maybe having lost a job or living on reduced income. So what we're seeing is that delinquency rates are somewhat higher than they were at the beginning of the year. We're also seeing that that renters are somewhat later in making their rent payments. It's actually improved, though, compared to the summertime. So as of October of this year, 94.8% of renters nationally have paid their rent on time. Earlier in the summer, it was more like 84, 85%. So we're seeing improvement there. Here in California, of course, we've got a statewide eviction moratorium that's in place until January 2021. When you look at these measures that are enabling renters to buy time and enabling homeowners to buy time, the whole idea here is to get us through this very difficult period of time during which we're recovering from the pandemic, and in time we're expecting that these households will be able to move forward as they get back to work and as their incomes are restored. So, building permits are off the mark compared to last year, down 12% for the LA Orange County region. We've heard a lot about the different shape of the recovery, and we've heard the letter K used. And in the case of housing, the letter K is a good way to characterize what's happening in the housing market. For would-be home buyers, this is a great opportunity to take advantage of very low rates and stretch that purchasing power to become a homeowner. That's great. But on the other hand, and so that's the upper part of the K. On the other hand, you've got the households that are facing financial difficulty during the pandemic disruption. And so for those households, we're trying to buy them time with these different programs that will hopefully enable them to make ends meet until the economy gets going again. So let's take a look at the outlook for 2021. The first thing I'd observe is, there is somewhat less uncertainty as we enter 2021 compared to where we were just a few months ago. The pandemic, we see that vaccines are within our reach. There is talk about the possibility that these vaccines will be widely distributed by the time we get to the second or third quarter of the year. That's good news. We still have to combat the second wave that's underway globally, but at least we're headed in the right direction. We know that there will be a new administration in Washington, D.C., so that element of uncertainty has been eliminated as we move into the new year. We'll be looking at new programs, new policies, new stances with respect to the rest of the world as the new administration enters office. In addition, when we take a look at how the economy is recovering, hang on one second. It's recovering not with a V shape, but more like a Nike swoosh shape. So it's recovering gradually. We were fortunate to claw back that $1.3 trillion in economic activity during the third quarter of the year. But recovering the remaining $700 billion is going to take some time. It's probably going to take several quarters. We expect that GDP will be fully recovered by the end of 2021. And as for the labor market, recovery takes longer, probably into 2022 or 2023, before we get back to what amounts to a full unemployment rate of about 4%. Progress is going to be uneven. The service sector really has been harder hit than the goods-producing sectors of the economy, because the service sectors are where you have a lot of face-to-face industries. So the goods sectors are recovering more quickly than the face-to-face sectors. So progress will be uneven. And when we look at the state of California and compare it with the recovery that's taking place nationally, we have to acknowledge California, at least at the present time, is recovering somewhat more slowly, partly, as I said before, because of the mix of industries that we have, and also because of the pace at which we're reopening the economy. And then, of course, as you'll hear in just a minute, we're going to talk about the county and local economy. We really need to track recovery at the county level, because that's really where the action is in terms of reopening the economy according to the plan that's been put out there by government officials. So on that note, I'm going to say thank you, and I'm going to turn it over at this time to Dr. Seiji Steinmetz, the director of the Office of Economic Research for Cal State Long Beach and the chair of the economics department, where he will talk about the local economy, both the county and Long Beach economy. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Kleinhens. It's very informative. Let's focus now on our regional economy, in particular Los Angeles County and Long Beach. So let's start with Los Angeles County. I'm just waiting for the slides. Okay, a key driver of our economy in Los Angeles County is consumer spending. And what we're looking at right now is a trend of spending throughout the year. That big drop you see right there, that was the shutdown. Since then, there's been a gradual recovery, and right now we're at about 14% lower spending in LA County than we were at the beginning of the year. And what you're going to do is you're going to see that reflected in our employment data. Right? You see that same drop-off and gradual recovery. During the shutdown, LA County lost over 700,000 jobs. 16% of all employment in LA County just disappeared within 2 months. But then with the recovery, since the shutdown up to now, we've seen about a gain of 200,000 of those jobs back. In other words, 30% of the jobs lost in LA County have returned. As a result, total employment in LA County now, relative to February, is about 89% of what it was in February. In other words, employment now, the 4.1 million jobs we see in LA County right now, is about 11% lower than it was back before the shutdown. All right, how is LA County doing relative to all the other large metropolitan areas in California? Well, we're ranking kind of towards the bottom. LA County is having a little bit, in terms of jobs recovered, we're having a little bit of a slower pace right now. And as we dig into these data a little bit, we're going to get some intuition as to why that is. So moving forward. All right, so let's look at this idea of our recovery trajectory in terms of jobs recovered that were lost during the shutdown. And we can look at this by industry to get a sense of the very different impacts, different recovery trajectories based on different industries. For example, if we look at the construction industry, about 3/4 of the jobs that were lost during the pandemic, during the shutdown have actually returned. All right, we have retail trade, healthcare and social assistance, wholesale trade. These were sectors that were hit very hard by the shutdown, but have bounced back relatively strongly. Over where we see those red bars indicating more struggling sectors, we have, for example, transportation and warehousing. About 26%, about 1/4 of the jobs in transportation and warehousing that were lost during the shutdown have returned. Moving over even more, look at the information sector. Now keep in mind, the information sector includes motion picture and sound recording, which has a very large presence in LA County. In that sector, only 4% of the jobs lost during the shutdown have returned. And this, let's keep in mind, 40% of all of the information sector jobs in California are in Los Angeles County. Similarly, about 1/3 of all transportation and warehousing jobs in in California are in LA County. So we've seen the relatively slow recoveries of those sectors is what might pull us down a little bit relative to other metropolitan areas in terms of our recovery trajectory. And then finally, let's look all the way to the right. We have a negative recovery in educational services. Educational services is struggling very much. And let's move to the next slide, because educational services gives us a good sense of the very different impacts that are hitting different industries, very disparate employment impacts. For example, in educational services, during the shutdown, about 12,000 jobs were lost in that sector. But after the shutdown, even more jobs were lost. An additional 12,000 jobs were lost after the shutdown. In contrast, let's look at finance and insurance, where during the shutdown, that sector actually gained jobs, perhaps due to all the assets moving back and forth as people figure out what to do with their wealth during these uncertain times. And then after the shutdown, there was an additional small gain of jobs. All right, let's move forward. So on balance, we could look at where is employment now relative to where it was before the shutdown, around the beginning of the year. For example, in the first column, we see in finance and insurance, employment is 103% of where it was toward the beginning of the year. In other words, despite the shutdown, despite the pandemic, we've seen a gain in finance and insurance jobs. Looking over towards the right of this graph, though, and we're not going to read you the whole graph. Remember, we're going to make this available to you on our Long Beach Economic Partnership website, so you can look through this a little more carefully. But we see over on the red side, again, we see educational services, only about 84% employment relative to the beginning of the year in LA County. But all the way to the right, we see two industries that are struggling relatively hard to come back. That's accommodation and food service, and arts, entertainment, and recreation. Those two sectors together represent a super sector called leisure and hospitality. So we're going to spend a little time on that in a minute here. But looking forward here, another way we can describe the very different impacts on different people during this, as we struggle through this pandemic, is to look at the types of employment impacts by income group. So this green line you're looking at here, that's the trend of employment in LA County throughout this year for high income earners. The red line is the trend in employment for low income earners. And as you see, the green line dips down and came back pretty strong, such that employment among high income jobs right now is about 5% lower than it was at the beginning of the year. In contrast, for low income workers, the employment right now is about 30% lower than it was at the beginning of the year. So when Dr. Kleinhans mentioned, for example, a K-shaped recovery, these are the up and down legs of the K-shaped recovery that one would refer to. Very different impacts for very different income groups. All right, moving forward. Okay, as we mentioned before, leisure and hospitality industries are struggling a bit. Let's look at, for example, spending on leisure and hospitality in LA County. That green line shows you that restaurants and hotel spending is down by about 48% since the beginning of the year. In entertainment and recreation, looking at that red line, spending is down by about 76% since the beginning of the year. So we wanted to take a deeper dive into what's going on in some of the subsectors of leisure and hospitality. All right. Let's consider, for example, food services and drinking places. During the shutdown, food services and drinking places, so these are restaurants and bars, have lost about 185,000 jobs in LA County during the shutdown. Since then, during this gradual recovery up to now, about 81,000 of those jobs have come back. So in other words, 44% of the jobs lost in food services and drinking places have returned. As a result, total employment now, relative to February, it is about 74% of what it was before. Looking at accommodation, however, on the next slide, it's a slightly more stark story. During the shutdown for accommodations, 22,000 jobs were lost, but since the reopening, only about 500 of those jobs have come back. In other words, the recovery rate of lost jobs in accommodations, right, hotels, for example, has only been about 2%. So now, total employment in LA County in accommodations is around half of what it was at the beginning of the year. Okay. So continuing. So we could do the same, we could take an even slightly deeper dive into what the leisure and hospitality recovery looks like. Drinking places, put a pin in that. That's a very interesting result. We're gonna have to get back to that. But we see, for example, in limited service eating places and full service restaurants, so basically restaurants, we've seen the relatively strong recovery in jobs, right, with 44 to 46% of the jobs lost during the shutdown coming back. However, in some of the other sectors, such as for caterers and mobile food, or museums and historical sites, accommodation we mentioned before, or amusement, gambling, and recreation, right, they're struggling a bit more to recover those jobs lost during the shutdown. All right, moving forward. As a result, for drinking places, again, we'll talk about, these are bars we're talking about. Actually, there's been an increase in employment despite the shutdown. But for every other of these subsectors in leisure and hospitality, we see that employment levels now, compared to the beginning of the year, fall short of, say, the overall county level. For example, in accommodation, we saw that there's only 56% of the, right now, jobs are only at about 56% of where they were at the beginning of the year. For amusement, gambling, and recreation, it's only about 50%. But what's going on with drinking places? Again, that's NACS code word for bars. Let's continue. All right, so in drinking places, during the shutdown, there were about 1,300 jobs lost in LA County. After the shutdown, about 2,100 jobs were gained. In other words, total employment now is about 109% of where it was before, with 162% lost job recovery rate. And I think this is a good example of innovation and resilience and adaptability. For example, the city of Long Beach has been very active and worked very closely with small business owners to find ways to adapt to this global economic crisis. For example, Long Beach has its Parklet program, which shuts off, closes streets and parking spaces and turns them into open air dining. And then you combine that with, for example, bars having kitchens, and therefore bars can be converted to restaurants to comply with health code standards at the county and state. There's been this pivot, which looks like it's resulted in a net gain in employment, like a total bounce back due to this ability to be resilient and adaptive in partnership with the city. All right, moving forward. So now speaking of Long Beach, let's look at the Long Beach employment situation. Unemployment right now in Long Beach is at 15.7%. The good news is that's better than the peak unemployment of 21%, but of course not as good as the 4.6% unemployment rate we enjoyed at the beginning of the year. Right now, there are 36,600 unemployed residents of Long Beach. One thing we should note that doesn't show up in these unemployment figures is that an additional 10,000 Long Beach residents have simply stopped looking for work. On balance, since the beginning of the year, we've seen a decrease of 10,000 labor force participants in Long Beach. All right. How does Long Beach unemployment look compared to our surrounding cities, known as the gateway cities? We're about in the middle of the pack. So Long Beach's unemployment rate is about on par with the surrounding region. Okay, let's look at new unemployment insurance claims. Now we have this for Long Beach, and what's extraordinary about this is if someone files a new unemployment claim now, that's going to show up in future unemployment data, right? So unemployment claims data at the local level, that's the closest thing we have to real-time data on the current health and trajectory of the recovery for our city. So we're going to dig into this a little bit. Overall, since the beginning of the year through October, our most recent month of data, there have been over 175,000 unemployment claims in our city, right, filed by our residents. Think of a normal week back before the shutdown would have been about 600 claims per week. By April, there were 11,000 claims per week. In the worst week, there were 18,000 claims filed in just 1 week. That's 30 times higher than normal. By the time we got to our most recent data, though, we're at about 3,000 claims per week for October, which again is still about 4 times higher than normal, but still considerably better than during the shutdown. So, this is the nerdiest graph. We're going to skip over this. All I want to tell you with this graph is that if we have unemployment claims now, those are going to show up about a month later in the unemployment data. So here's some good news. In September, the monthly unemployment claims rate fell by about 15%, and in October it fell by another 28%. What that means is, as long as we're staying safe and being responsible, that means we should anticipate further reductions in unemployment looking forward in our city. All right. Now, another way to look at how the pandemic has been affecting different groups very differently, let's look at the total number of unemployment insurance claims that have been filed by our residents by educational attainment. And we see, for example, in this red text, we see for those who have a maximum educational attainment of a high school diploma or a GED, that there have been about 75,000 claims filed by that group. In other words, 44% of all claims filed in Long Beach or by Long Beach residents are coming from people who have at most a high school education. But they only represent 18% of Long Beach's working age population. In other words, those with lower educational attainment are being hit especially hard in terms of unemployment. In contrast, anybody with a college degree or higher working in Long Beach, right, among that group, only about 17% of the claims filed come from people who have a college degree or higher, even though they represent close to a third of Long Beach's working age population. All right. Let's continue. We could also look at unemployment claims filed by the industries that Long Beach residents work in. And again, I will spare you from reading you this whole table. This will be made available to you at the Long Beach Economic Partnership website. But let's look at a couple of sectors. For example, we see that in accommodation and food services. So Long Beach residents working in accommodation and food services clearly dominate the unemployment claims rates, right? The 25,000 claims have come from people who work in that industry and live in our city. Right, that's 18% of all Long Beach unemployment claims, despite representing only about 8.6% of where our residents work. Right, and of course we see, for example, arts, entertainment, and recreation was disproportionately hit hard. This will be made available for you to refer later. But one other way that we can look at different impacts on different groups in Long Beach is to look at unemployment insurance claims by zip code. All right, so what's going on here? We have a map with, inside those circles, those represent the centers of different zip codes in our city. And what we do is we take the total number of unemployment claims in our city, right, in each zip code, and then we divide by the number of working residents who live in each zip code. What that does is it gives us a sense of how concentrated unemployment has been due to this pandemic by neighborhoods in Long Beach. Bigger circles means a greater incidence or greater concentration of unemployment. And for those of you who attended the previous Long Beach Quarterly Economic Forum, you will recognize from this pattern that it's the lower income areas of Long Beach that appear to have been most affected by this pandemic. Again, let me say that again. Lower income areas of Long Beach have been more affected by unemployment during this pandemic. All right, so moving forward, what do we do now? Let's look ahead. Here's some good news. Port of Long Beach, right? Our regional economy depends very much on international trade and port activity. Dr. Kleinhans gave us a foreshadow that we're going to talk about this. In the most recent month, if we look at this green line, which is showing you the rate of inbound containers that have goods on them coming into the port. All right. These are goods that are coming into the country to be stocking shelves in our region and also throughout the country. In the month of September, there were 405,000 loaded inbound containers coming through the Port of Long Beach. That's the largest in history for the Port of Long Beach. I don't mean the largest this year. Even during a pandemic year, a record was set for the number of loaded inbound containers and also overall container movements into the Port of Long Beach. What that does is that signals that Businesses and consumers appear confident. As we head into the holidays, it looks like there's going to be more goods than ever available for purchase, right? It's a very strong indicator of increased consumption in our region. All right? Moving forward. So, looking ahead, how do we summarize what's going on? Overall, the spending trend is headed upward. Recent port activity signals further increases, but we keep in mind some sectors are struggling to recover, such as leisure and hospitality. Overall employment is gradually recovering. About 30% of LA County's lost jobs have been recovered. And Long Beach unemployment claims are trending downward, which signals further decreases in unemployment, so long as we continue on this path. All right, moving forward. Let's keep in mind, however, that there have been very different impacts on very different groups. Long Beach unemployment claims have been especially concentrated among lower income neighborhoods and residents with lower educational attainment. Also, the employment recovery rate is much stronger among higher paying jobs than it is for lower paying jobs. And of course, there are different recovery paths for different sectors. For example, in accommodations, right, the hotel industry, only 2% of the jobs lost during the pandemic shutdown have been recovered. And in fact, for educational services, more jobs were lost after the shutdown than during the shutdown. So what do we do now? Let's continue with innovative strategies such as Long Beach's Parklet program, right? Finding ways to adapt as best we can. What we're doing right here is just a great example. I wish we could turn this camera around and show you this amazing socially distanced crew and this terrace theater setup. There's an entire production setup here. It's remarkable. Everybody's staying safe, wearing masks, and delivering this content to you remotely, safely, and effectively. So let's try and find ways to continue doing that. Also, let's continue with recovery and relief policies that recognize that there's been very different impacts for different groups, right? The city, for example, the city of Long Beach recently announced its BizCare program designed to help small business owners who have been most impacted by the pandemic. Right? And then finally, let's not undo our recovery. Oh, let's go back one slide, please. Let's not undo this recovery. We've seen how deep the impact of the shutdown was. We've seen how gradual and cautious the recovery is. Let's not go backwards, dig a hole, and have to climb out of it again. So please, for the health of our economy and for our physical health, please wear a mask, practice social distancing. And with that, on behalf of the Long Beach Economic Partnership and the California State University Long Beach, thank you for listening. Go Long Beach and go Beach.
Thanks, Robert and Seiji. Wow, that's a ton of great information. So as you were talking, we've had questions coming in live from our audience. I've got a few here collected. Those watching at home, feel free to shoot questions in because we've got a little bit of time here. First, why don't you talk about what you're anticipating from the transition to the Biden administration and what you foresee for the future for the local economy here?
Well, Dr. Kleinens, you want to take that one?
Sorry, I'm not hearing.
Oh, the question. The question, well, actually, Mark, could you repeat the question?
Sure. The question is, what sort of local impacts do you expect from the transition to a Biden administration?
Local impacts? Well, for one thing, we expect that the Biden administration might be a little bit more inclined to look favorably upon California and its communities. So I would expect to see that again, both California and the city of Long Beach are going to see more resources flow in our direction. We still have to wait to see them outline their plans, but let's suppose they decide to roll back some of the trade restrictions that were put in place over the last several years. I would expect to see that work to the benefit of the Port of Long Beach as well as the Port of Los Angeles, and of course those are big economic drivers for the local economy.
Awesome. How important do you think additional recovery is to our local economy as we continue to grapple with the impacts of COVID?
I'll take that. So it's very important. I mean, we've made extraordinary progress thus far, haven't we? You've seen the data where we're getting the jobs back, consumer spending is up, but at the end of the day, when you look at where we are relative to the beginning of the year, we have a long way to go. right? So things are looking in the right direction, but we have a long way to go. So the recovery is very important to us locally. I mean, we've seen that at the neighborhood level, haven't we, in the data?
So one of our folks at home has this question: what happened to the V-shaped recovery that we heard so much about in the early months of the pandemic?
Well, the V-shaped recovery that many were hoping for might have occurred if the pandemic hit us and then we recovered immediately. But as we got further into those first few months of the pandemic shutdown, it became clear that there was real damage being done to the local, national, and state economies. And so pretty quickly, economists let go of the idea that we were going to see a V-shaped recovery. Right now, we were fortunate to see the kind of surge in economic activity during the third quarter. Back in June, we saw a sizable gain in jobs that were lost during the shutdown. Those are both great things to see, but what we're looking at right now and what we expect to see over the next several quarters is a much more gradual recovery. It's probably going to look very much like the kinds of recoveries that we've seen in past economic cycles. Let's keep in mind that both households and businesses are going to be moving forward with a certain amount of caution. And it's not just because of the fact that we're dealing with the pandemic and working on containing it, but there's a lot of uncertainty about other factors that lead people to tread carefully and to tread slowly. And eventually we're going to get back on track. I think it's important to recognize that, again, as I said during my presentation, we're thinking that economic activity will recover by the end of next year, and that the labor market is going to recover sometime in 2022. So these are somewhat longer growth paths than anybody had hoped for or wished for, but it's important to kind of gauge that timeline so that we can plan accordingly.
Thanks, Robert. We have another question coming in from someone at home. How might a new stay-at-home order in California or LA County affect the economic recovery?
Well, it depends on the length of the stay-at-home order, right? If you look back at what happened, we had a fairly long shutdown nationally before, and that caused a big drop across the board in terms of economic activity and employment, and a slow and gradual recovery. If we saw a shutdown again of that duration, we might expect similar effects, although let's keep in mind that we've done this before now. But at that point, if we have another shutdown, we've practiced. Every one of us knows how to get on a Zoom meeting. We know how to deliver an event from the Long Beach Convention Center, right? We know how to telemed into our doctors now. So I wouldn't expect it to be as drastic, but it will definitely hurt.
And Mark, may I add, as you think about how this is playing out, these shutdown orders mainly affect certain segments of our economy. And so even as they're having to cut back their economic activity, we're seeing that other sectors of the economy are indeed advancing. So it's good to keep in mind that to a certain extent we're moving forward even as we have to take a step back from time to time in order to combat the virus.
And I'm sorry, and I feel compelled to add just one more thing to that. We often ask, what happens to our economy if we shut down, and we talk about the negative economic consequences of doing that. But what we really have to keep in mind is, what are the economic consequences of not shutting down, right? We won't ever be able to know that for sure, but often these types of economic measures, right, these safety measures that have dire economic consequences are designed to prevent even more dire economic consequences in the future.
Another question from one of the folks watching: why is California and LA County lagging behind other parts of the country in recovery?
I'll start and then maybe Seiji can speak after, but as I pointed out, there are a couple of things in play here. One is the fact that we have a slightly different mix of industries or industry concentrations. We rely more heavily on tourism, for example, and that's by far the hardest hit sector of the economy during the pandemic. And so the fact that that's reopening more slowly, And as was pointed out by Seiji in the local numbers, the transportation and warehousing, which is very important to the LA County economy, is reopening more slowly. These are affecting the pace with which we come back and add jobs. On top of that, or maybe coupled with that, the fact that our protocols for reopening are slower, quite a bit slower than some of the other states around the nation. And frankly, I'm okay with that, because if it means that we're going to be keeping this virus in check as we move forward. Maybe Sage has something to say too.
No, I mean, I think that's spot on. And then let's also consider the scale of employment in California. For example, if we look at the Los Angeles and Orange County region, we have Disneyland, for example, lost 28,000 jobs. I mean, that magnitude of a job loss that's the size of many reasonable sized cities in the United States. So it's really the composition of our regional economy with more reliance on tourism, more reliance on trade, transportation, and warehousing, and then more reliance on specialty industries such as motion picture and sound recording, where the recoveries are slower.
So I have this is a great economics question. Which is more important to recovery, producers ramping up or consumers purchasing?
Okay, go for it.
The answer is yes. Right? Why do producers ramp up? Because they expect consumers to produce. Of course, the consumers aren't going to produce. The consumers aren't going to consume if they don't believe there's anything on the shelf or if they don't have the confidence to do so. So it's really the interaction of producers and consumers that if both are heading in an upward direction, then they're equally important. What we usually do is we look at, for example, if you saw from my presentation, we look at consumer spending, right? And then what usually goes with that is as consumers spend and producers ramp up and fill their shelves or produce more goods and services, that leads to a need for more jobs or to get old jobs back, right? So what we're going to see, and we saw this in the Great Recession before, is that unemployment rates are going to drop slower than the economy picks up. So maybe a macro way to answer that question is, as we see an increase in economic output, our gross domestic product, we'll see employment gains follow that. And it could be a year or two later even before we see those things match up.
And Mark, the unique aspect of this pandemic recession is that it had both a supply and a demand side to it. So typically we see recessions occur as aggregate demand in the economy plunges. But this time, because of the shutdown, we also had the means of production shutting down. So, this just tells us about the symbiotic relationship between the people who buy stuff and the people who produce stuff. They both will move forward and move the economy forward. But I would say the producers, to a certain extent, have to take their cues from the buyers, whether it's in the consumer sector or other sectors of the economy.
Great. Well, we have one last question, and that is, if I could give each of you a magic wand, what policy would you implement today to have a positive impact on our economy?
I'll go first. That magic wand would automatically put masks on people and have them stay 6 to 10 feet away from each other and not travel too much during the holidays.
So if that's the health policy that would occur, I would also be in favor of yet another fiscal stimulus support package at the federal level that's going to put money in the pockets of the households that are hardest hit at this time and the small businesses that continue to need help. Because if we are able to create a financial backstop for these parts of the economy, we're going to be moving forward that much faster, and we're going to mitigate the pain that people have already suffered or will suffer in the months ahead.
Great. Well, thank you both. Unfortunately, I don't have a magic wand, but I do want to thank both of you for being with us today and for sharing that amazing presentation and answering the questions from our watchers. So that brings us to the end of our program. I want to thank those of you who joined us online. I want to apologize. We actually had so many people online that it might have affected your experience a little bit. We had some traffic issues. We'll improve that as we go on in rolling out these new tools. But I could see that we had great viewership the whole time, so I really want to thank you for staying with us and being here today. I want to thank all of our speakers, everyone who came in to share their story about how they're innovating to survive and succeed here in 2020. I also want to thank our sponsors one last time: the Boeing Company, the Long Beach Economic Partnership, Cal State University Long Beach, the Long Beach Convention and Visitor Bureau, the Long Beach Business Journal, Intertrend, the Downtown Long Beach Alliance, the Long Beach Economic Development Department, and finally Shoreline Village. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and we hope you will join us back here again in 2021 for the next Quarterly Economic Forum. Have a great day, and go Long Beach.